Hi, Namaskar. I'm Jyoti Kiran. Welcome to a special program, History Hunter, a program that takes you through a journey of time. And our special guest today is Delhi's well-known vintage memorabilia collector, Aditya Vij. Aditya ji, how this hobby turned into a passion and how it all started, please tell.
The story started actually very young. I used to go out on walks with my father and I would end up picking up matchboxes on the way because they used to be a very interesting thing for me. That interest still carries on, and today I almost have a 3000 plus matchbox collection which goes to 1920s onwards. From there, history has always been a point of interest, and I eventually went on to studying anthropology, which actually inculcated a lot of factors as well into me. But I actually started and decided that I should put these things together because over the last 20 odd years, I saw things changing far too quickly. Every technological aspect changing, everything going into a different direction. And that's where and how I started putting a lot of different categories together.
What kind of things you collect?
It starts from the vintage cars, gets on to some two-wheelers, moves on to telephones, moves on to a lot of cameras, moves on to watches, moves on to books, moves on to British memorabilia, moves on to movie posters, because that has seen a sea change over a last 70-80 years era. And a lot of other artifacts. It could be a statue, it could be a typewriter, it could be for one of the first cell phones to hit the country, to tube radios, to actually vintage tin boxes. So the list is actually never ending. It's just that if it is old, it has to be put together. That's how I perceive and see it as.
So how you would start that?
Basically, if it was to go chronologically, I think we'll have to travel millions of years back. Why? Because I actually have put together some fossils in place, and it has been followed up by a lot of prehistoric tools. Both these elements actually came in as I studied anthropology, and I managed to put them together, and they have been actually been certified by most of the top anthropologists in the country. From where it leads on to about a 200 odd year old journey, where we have some artifacts coming in from the era which is like a part of broken stone from the Qutub Minar, or a part of the broken door from the Samod Palace. So from there it has led on to some British maps, a 1933 Delhi map where the Britishers actually put up, which actually still shows all the 255 odd villages in Delhi and only 3 inhabited areas. And carrying it on forward to the telephones, to the development of cameras. Some of the old cameras go back to 1920s and 1930s. The German made, the Indian made, and the British made. To the vintage clocks, which go back to again 1910s, 1920s and 1930s. From iconic names like the Ansonia from the US, or the Veltas from the Germany, or the Kenzels from Germany. So the dates are there. Now the latest in the chronological order, anything that I put together, I try that it should at least be about 50 or to 60 years old, except in categories which have been new. For example, pages. The 90s saw communication change with the pagers. As a matter of fact, most of the youngsters that I come across today don't even know what a pager is. So it's as late as 90s as the latest collection. We can have a look at a couple of fossils just to have people understand what it is. We have a snail fossil here, which has actually become a stone over millions of years of heat and pressure and having been pressed. This is one category of fossils which is there. I can take you along with another type of fossil, which is a sedimentational fossil, in which the clay actually buries down the animal and eventually the animal is preserved. Here we have a fish fossil which is there. Now I have a lot of other fossils on the same lines, so just an idea for the viewers to understand what it is like. And from here we can take it on to looking at some prehistoric tools. The prehistoric tools have been stone collections like these, where the prehistoric man used to use it as a skiver. He would hold it up and clean out the skins using these stone tools, to using some arrowheads which have been made sharpened out and edges made sharper, to some bone drillers where they would drill it into the bones to derive the bone marrows. So the story prehistorically has been on how man has actually managed to develop technology for his own usage.
I am time. I am never good, and I am never bad. I never alter my pace. I just keep going. It's your version of me, where I am all the above. But in my world, the real world, I am always on time. Never late, never fast.
Man has always bothered and cared about time. As a matter of fact, time keeping has been a very important factor for man, and the different types of clocks got me a lot excited. As a matter of fact, I collect 3 different categories of watches and clocks, which is from the wall clocks, and it would be a very nice thing to actually share with you. People have a wall clock, I have a clock wall. So I have about 30 odd clocks which are there on a single wall, and all of them have a vintage value, and all of them have a pendulum operating, key operating, winding systems which is there in them. The second category are the table clocks, where I have a few very iconic ones, from the Worley 3-in-1s to the Ansonias which are there, to the Kenzels, and to a lot of Jaycos. The Jayco has been a very interesting story, where Jayco actually started making the clocks in India based on the German technology. So the Jaycos are there, the Worleys are there, the Hess clocks are there, which have been made in the Maharashtra region and taken up post-independence from the British stories. And then the last category which I have are the wrist watches. So from Romers to Fevelubas to Jayco, again a wristwatch, and now a few HMTs. They give you the whole value of the clocks. What I have done on the clocks over the last few years is that I have actually got them maintained. I've got them ticking, and the sound of their gongs, the sound of their ticking actually makes it. We've had very interesting stories behind it. As a matter of fact, I got a clock fixed where it would go tick tock, and the ring would come out every hour, the gong, and my maid walked out of the house saying, "This is a scary house, it is haunted." So it's a story which comes along with the operational aspects of it, and to some cuckoo clocks which have been an iconic story as well, where the bird we see walking out and giving a ring. So I have managed to actually do this with the help of 2 very old operators who have been operating it all their lives. They are almost touching 80 years plus of their ages, and they only help me in restoring my watches and my clocks. From moving on from the Fevelubas which we saw, which actually come in from the early 1950s, let's have a look at the Romers. These Romers are actually dated to be 1958, and I have a very interesting story behind it. I took it to the oldest shop in Connaught Place and asked them if they could fix it for me, and the gentleman looked at it and smiled and told me, "I sold this very watch for 58 rupees in 1958. So do you want to spend a few thousand rupees on restoring it?" And I told him, "Yes, I want it." So that's the Romer which is there, which is coming in from the 1950s. This is a Henry Sandoz, again early 1950s. And all these clocks, all these wristwatches actually have a story that they were the smugglers' favorites. They were actually smuggled into those eras into the country, as bringing in these watches was not allowed. That's what makes them even more collectible. These are a few of the HMTs that I have. HMTs became a collector's item since the time HMT put down its shutters after I think about 6 decades of watch production. HMTs had its own charm. They're all winding clocks where every morning you need to actually adjust the time and then go on and carry on with your day. What we see here is one of the oldest table clocks that I have. That's an Insonia brought in from the US by the Britishers in the late 30s, early 1940s. And the quality and the look of it is still maintained almost after about 75 years as well. What we have here is a Worley 3-in-1 iconic German watch. As a matter of fact, it is a 3 different ringtone table clock and is a collector's item across the globe today. This is a Hess timepiece. The Hess has been an Indian takeover of the table clocks from the Britishers and followed the same kind of wheel movement and the key movements which were there. And they came up with wonderfully colored clocks, table clocks as such eventually. Okay, we have these as the folding clocks which came in, the table clocks which came in. They're the Europas which came in from the Germany, and they had it in all shapes and sizes. They had the square ones, the rectangular ones, the round ones, and one could just pack them up and put them back. What we have here are the German Kensels. The German Kensels were considered to be a very high technologically advanced table clocks in their era, and were considered to be, again, in the modern times, a collector's piece. What we have here is American West clocks. The West clocks came in from the US and came in into all shapes and sizes, giving a lot of different perspective to the table clocks. They came in with broader bases most of the times. This is another Kensel piece which was taken over from the German technological art pieces.
That's very interesting, sounds very interesting. Next, if we talk about the phones, you can see that there are all kind of phones. Tell something about your phones.
Hello, dear friend Gandhi. You have shown through your works that it is possible to succeed without violence, even with those who have not discarded the method of violence. We may hope that your example will spread beyond the borders of your country. I hope that I will be able to meet you face to face someday.
Namaskar, my dear friend. It is a great consolation to me that the work I am doing finds favor in your sight. I do indeed wish that we could meet face to face, and that too in India at my ashram.
Communication has been a key element in the development of mankind. As a matter of fact, the world changed with the advent of the telephones. I still have managed to put in a lot of rotatory phones together, which have been there around since the 1950s. And we see a lot of pictures where people would get pictures clicked with the phones because they were unique for that element. Then I put together a couple of coin phones, which, while people never had phones at their homes, would go out, use a rupee coin and would end up making a call. So I put that phone together, and some phones which I have actually gotten a different kind of rotatory mechanisms. And eventually in my phone, the latest one is the second model of the mobile phones launched in India. It's a Motorola flap phone. As a matter of fact, it is a 1998 model. Since the first phones came in 1996, I am still looking out for that one, but I managed to put together a 1998 Motorola flip phone which is there.
So with the telephone, as you said, communication started, and the next tool associated with communication is radios.
I think in our country, radios always played a major role. As a matter of fact, it's been one of the main mediums of communication, especially in a country like ours where the literacy levels have been pretty low. The radios have actually brought life to a lot of areas. That's what got me interested, because we have iconic radio brands which are there, from Murphy's to the Echoes, which are there. So the tube radio concept got me interested a lot, because we don't see the tube radios. As a matter of fact, today I think 90% of the population does not even understand what is a tube radio. So I started putting together some tube radios, and I have managed to put together and make 3 of them in a working condition as well now. What we see here is a very interesting radiogram. It has a Philips radio which is fixed inside, and the speakers itself weigh about 20 kgs. So this whole set almost weighs about 35 kgs plus. This is 60s. What we have here is a Siemens radio, which is a 1960s model. The second one which we see is a very interesting Philips model, because this is a model which came in with a speaker on the sides. As a matter of fact, it works. We can have a look at and hear some music right now out of it. It had metallic speakers which were installed into the Philips for the first time in 1960s. What we have is a Murphy Mayfair. The Murphys have been iconic, especially after we have had the Murphy song in the movie coming through. And I have about 8 or 9 different Murphy models which are there. And the Mayfair has been one of their most selling models as such. This is a 1970s Murphy. All of them are tube radios, and if we turn them around and see, we can see the tubes inside glowing away and showing the different signals. The whole aspect, they don't catch the FMs, and they only operate on the medium waves or the short waves. So listening to the short wave or a medium wave has a charm of its own.
Right. And with the advent of computers and laptops, one thing is almost extinct, and that is typewriters. So please tell about your collection of typewriters.
Typewriters have been on as late as the late 1980s or early 1990s. But the older typewriters which were actually brought in from the Britishers or the Germans or the Americans had its own charm. They operated in a very nice manner. So I put together about 5-6 typewriters just for their value and their brand stories. I have a Groma Calibri which is there, which is a German 1956 typewriter. I have a Smith Krona from the American collections. We have a Remington which is there, and so on and so forth. What has changed and what people don't realize today is that typing on a computer and using a keyboard is a very easy element, and you have the option of rectifying it. But when you were using a typewriter, you needed the precision and the control of not making a mistake, because you could not rectify it. That was the art element in actually using a typewriter to set it up on a paper and go through it without actually making a mistake. So that's what gets me very interested in the typewriter stories as well.
If we talk about the British era, you have many things related to British memorabilia also. So tell us something about that. I've heard you have an old Delhi map.
The Britishers left a lot of benchmarking for us. As a matter of fact, we still follow a lot of things which the Britishers introduced to us in this part of the world, and putting them together and seeing their class and the quality that they would focus on brings in a lot of good feel factors and learning aspects. For a few examples, which is say the lithoprinting, which we follow for almost about 50-60 years, was introduced to us by the Britishers for printing the books or printing the posters as such. A small example of a British scale that I have from 1942 is that it is a scale which actually manages to do a lot of mathematical and a financial aspects all in itself. It has a calculation, it's a 3-in-1 scale which calculates a lot of things together. What we see here is the British Army knife. They give this to the people in the Second World War, where it was more of a poker rather than a knife. So anybody would go and just insert it and move on. So this is one of the British knives, which dates to 1878. As a matter of fact, we have the patent design for this, which has been on 22nd October 1878 made, and the technological advancement of it goes beyond, because even 150 years ago these people lined up their jugs with the ceramic inside to keep things warm, and they had the pins which they made in Australia, which was one of their territories at that point of time. So basically what you see is that the Britishers actually used all their territories for different products. These stapler pins for these staplers were made in Australia. We can see them there. These are 1940s stapler pins. What we see here is a British era earring hanging box. It's quite unlike what we see today. They used to have the earrings hanging into their box as a gift item. We see in this tin box we have all the territories the Britishers had under their control. We see India, we see Africa, we can see Australia, and we can see Canada. So a tin box which has a 4-continent history in itself. What we see here is the coronation plate. This is what was given out as a gift to all the people who came in to attend the Delhi Darbar in 1911. This is when Delhi became the capital and was shifted from Calcutta, that this was given out to people who attended the event.
Aditya ji, if we talk about your some favorite piece, or we can say a piece for which you have to toil hard to get it, any such memory?
Favoritism, I would not do it, because it's like you can't choose a child. I look at anything which is vintage or which is old with equal amount of preciousness attached to it, because I know if it is not put together or if it is not saved, it would soon disappear. For a matter of fact, actually had a car which I wanted so desperately that I was ready to take a flight and land up there to negotiate, so which I actually did. I flew down to Karnataka, got the car, negotiated with this doctor who had his car lying in his junkyard for the last 70 years and brought it back here. To a lot of other things as well, where for example, I found some sairs, which are the old weights before the kilograms came in, with a kabadiwala, and the kabadiwala was, when I stopped him and asked him, do you want to sell it to me? And he wanted a price where he said, I will sell it to you at double the price by weighing it. And I was absolutely jumping with joy that I would pay anything to get it, and he only wants double the price of the weight of the iron. So there are many stories practically attached with a lot of things which are there, and each product as it comes has its own story associated there. The Qutub Minar carved piece which I have, I think I was about 9 years when I actually went there, and the facade of the Qutub Minar had broken down, and unluckily we had all those parts dumped. I just picked up one as a piece to put together. So every piece that would be around that you see has a story associated with it.
Aditya ji, we heard you had a really hard time to buy a antique statue. Tell us something about that.
I saw a very nice stone statue and I wanted it for myself, but the guy who was selling it and I would not reach at a price which was mutually acceptable. So I said, okay, let me give him some time and I will take it up afterwards once he decides to bring down the price. But the guy in the meanwhile sold it off to somebody, and when I realized it a few hours later that he had sold it off, I was like nothing doing, I need it. So I went up to him, I said, I don't care, you have to find out where did you sell it to. So luckily this guy knew this guy he had sold it to, and he told me that he stays in Moradabad and he's left for Moradabad with the statue. So I told him, give me the numbers and everything, and finally I managed to track down the guy in Moradabad, and I told him that I need it, and this is what the story is. I did end up paying a bit more money than what we started with initially, but I was sure that I wanted it because I wasn't ready to lose it.
So this shows your passion and love for the antique artifact things. And moving on, we'd like to ask you, do you have any advice or tips for our viewers?
The only advice or suggestion that I think I can offer to the viewers is that we need to understand the value of the past, because whatever we have in the present actually comes in because we had it in the past and we managed to change it and develop it to the current times. Unluckily, most of the artifacts, most of the old things actually end up in trash. I've seen a lot of times people just dumping away the old things, and they just get into either being recycled. For example, the tin boxes, the plastic things, the other materials, they just dump it. There are values and emotions attached to it. If you can keep them, keep them. Otherwise, don't just dump them and throw them away. Give it to somebody who can take care of them. Give it to somebody who can preserve it for the eventual generations to have a look at.
So Aditya ji, talking about your future plans, you have worked hard collecting so many kind of things, artifacts and historical things. So what next?
I eventually will have my own museum. That's the focus, that is what I'm working towards, and I will make sure that that happens. It takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of time, and but I'm sure that I want to do it. I want to leave it, because even now I get people over to my place who especially want to bring in their children to see that this is how we used to make a telephone call, or this is how we used to click a picture, or this is how we used to type a letter. I want the future generations to value it, to see it, and to ensure that that happens, and even after I am gone, it stays as a legacy. I am going to have my private museum set up for sure, and I'm definitely working towards it.
It's time to say goodbye till we meet next time at the same time in the next episode of History Hunter. And in the next episode, we'll be talking about much more interesting things like film posters, vintage cars, scooters, and many more.